Welcome and thank you for joining us today. We are very pleased to be back for the sixth webinar of the New Deal series on financing sustainability. Infrastructure plays a significant role in achieving maximum positive long-term impact, especially in the recovery post-crisis. Sustainable infrastructure, more specifically, can significantly contribute to medium and long-term economic growth and meet global climate targets and the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. However, there are challenges to implementing sustainable infrastructure at the speed and scale needed to achieve these goals, especially within the constraint of the current economic landscape. Meeting global climate targets will require actions from all parties. More specifically, G20 government will need to leverage private sector participation to scale up sustainable infrastructure investment. This webinar will be focused on two projects where sustainability is a key element. The first project is part of the Namami Ganges program, which is a major environmental program in India to clean the Ganges River. Over 75% of the sewage generated in the town and city along the Ganges flows untreated into the 2,500 long river, which is a water source for 500 million people, or 43% of India's population. Recognizing the need to rejuvenate the river in a sustainable way, the government of India approved the program in 2015 and created the National Mission for Clean Ganga, NMCG, managed by the Ministry of Water Resources to develop several sewage treatment plants through PPP projects. The second project is the Timor-Leste first PPP project, Tiba Bay Port. Central to government strategy to connect Timor-Leste to the world and engage a diversification and growth of its economy, highly dependent on the oil and gas sector. The new port infrastructure will solve the growing congestion at the Dili port, a serious economic bottleneck, and ensure that Timor-Leste has the modern and sustainable port infrastructure needed for its development. All along the project development, local communities were engaged and a rigorous environmental and social assessment was conducted. Financing sustainability is also about long-lasting and impactful projects that can be replicated and have the potential to be sustainable over time. Why? Because the contractual and financial PPP models developed in these two projects were designed to be sustainable and replicable. For the Ganges project, the hybrid annuity PPP model was established as a sustainable model for the development of wastewater treatment plants with private sector participation. For the Timor-Leste project, the implementation of the first PPP needed a stable and sustainable policy environment to attract private investment for future infrastructures. Besides, this project will have significant economic-wide effect through the provision of local jobs and economic opportunities for the communities. I am sure we will learn a lot from our distinguished panelists during the discussion. We are very pleased to be collaborating with the IFC and expert panelists worldwide on this series, which is connected to our innovative funding and financing resource, which you can find on our website, alongside with the case study developed with IFC and other organizations. My colleague Jordana is putting the link to these resources in the chat. To facilitate this interaction and ask your question, you can use the Slido platform with the QR code, which has been placed in the chat. And I would like now to introduce Thomas Lubeck, Regional Manager PPP Transaction Advisory Service at IFC, covering the Southeast Asia and East Asia Pacific region. Thomas oversees a team of professionals working on helping governments design, tender, negotiate, and implement PPPs and concessions across a wide range of infrastructure, including transport, renewable energy, affordable housing, and healthcare. Thomas will speak about IFC work in this area and introduce us to the panelists and transaction for today.
Great. Thank you very much, Maud, for this kind introduction. Thanks also for inviting me here today. I'm thrilled to be co-hosting this 6th webinar in the joint GIH-IFC series on funding solutions for the future of infrastructure. Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, as the case may be, to everybody on the line from the IFC office in Mumbai, India. So sustainability, of course, is one of the core values within the World Bank Group that we are trying to leverage to achieve our twin goals of ending poverty, as well as boosting shared prosperity. IFC's commitment to environmental and social sustainability and good corporate governance helps our clients to improve business performance, protect the environment, engage with affected communities, increase impact, and enhance transparency. So the two projects that we're going to be focusing in on today come from two quite different environments. India, of course, has one of the world's largest populations. It is the world's largest democracies, has a very well-developed professional civil service, and a highly diversified economic base. At the same time, Timor-Leste is one of the world's youngest countries with a relatively small population and concentration of economic wealth coming from the oil and gas industry. The one common theme, though, between these two countries and the different environments is that IFC's PPP Transaction Advisory Service was the lead advisor which helped the two respective client governments to attract the private sector and bring these two PPP transactions to commercial close. In each case, the approach was tailored to meet the specific needs of each environment and to overcome all of the practical obstacles that existed in each of these different markets. So with that, I am thrilled to be welcoming the four panelists that we have with us today, starting with Mr. Ruiz Suarez, Director of the T-Bar Bay Port Management Unit, and previously was the Director of the National Petroleum Authority in Timor-Leste. Also with us today is Mr. Christopher Bleakley, who is a Senior Operations Officer in IFC, leading the PPP Transaction Advisory Team for the Pacific region in IFC. Also with us is Mr. Rajesh Chopra, Global Head of Business Development, VA Tech Vabag, a major water and wastewater company, and he's responsible for their strategic alliances globally. Also with us is Mr. Madhava Kumar, working as Economic and Finance Advisor with the National Mission for Clean Ganga at the Ministry of Jal Shakti. And with that, I think it's time now for us to really dive into the content. So I ask Mr. Kumar and Chopra to please turn their cameras on.
I think this is Madhava Kumar here. I'm unable to start the camera because it's switched off from the host side. Can you please put on the camera?
Okay, so perhaps while they're working on that technical solution, I can start to introduce the question, Mr. Kumar. So,
all right.
Mr. Kumar, can you briefly describe for our listeners the Clean Ganga program and let us know why this program was such an important one for India?
Yeah, thanks, Thomas, and I thank IFC as well as the Global Infrastructure Hub for this opportunity. We all understand that since time immemorial, the human civilization has evolved and around the water bodies, particularly rivers. But growing anthropogenic activities in the river basins has degenerated our precious water resources. So this happened in every nation in the world, and India is no exception to this. In fact, in the 6th assessment report of the IPCC, which says that the approach to climate mitigation should also look into the water as a major factor. And predominantly the climate crisis is going to be the water crisis. So from this perspective, the river Ganges, which is the national river of India, gains immense importance, not only because of its size and environmental concerns, but also because of the significant cultural importance attached to it. So from this, the requirement for rejuvenation of river Ganga starts. Many previous governments have also attempted the rejuvenation of River Ganga with some efforts, but the efforts were not sufficient enough to meet the rejuvenation requirement. Now, if you look at the size of the River Ganga, it is close to 2,525 kilometers. I'm talking about the main stem of the River Ganga, not the tributaries. If you include the tributaries, it will multiply it will go in multi-fold. It starts from Gangotri Glacier in Uttarakhand to the Bay of Bengal in West Bengal. Now, 28% of water resources is in River Ganga. 43% of India's population is residing in this basin. It's close to 1 million square meter basin. 26% of land area is in the basin. More than 100 cities are in the Ganga River basin. It's also habitat for very precious and very rare aquatic life, including Gangetic dolphins, gharials, golden mahasas, otters, turtles, etc. And above all, millions take bath in this river every year, throughout the year, and also during very significant or important cultural event that happens maybe twice, thrice in a year. So when this present government came into power in 2014, the Namami Gange program was approved with an investment of close to $3 billion to address the rejuvenation requirement. And I wanted to highlight here, it is a non-lapsable budget. That means there is a strategic committed funding line available from the government side for rejuvenation program. But this doesn't stop the government from involving the private sector in the rejuvenation wherever it is possible. Basically, the function of rejuvenation is focused on 4 strategic pillars. One is Nirmal Ganga, what we call as unpolluted flow. Aviral Ganga, which is continuity or the E-flow minimum requirement. Then Gyan Ganga, which is the R&D, research development and knowledge sharing. And Jan Ganga, which is people participation. These are the 4 major pillars on which this whole program is revolved. And certain important institutional reforms also happened in 2016. NMCG, National Mission for Clean Ganga, which was established for implementation of the River Ganga rejuvenation, was converted into an authority under Environmental Protection Act. There was a major paradigm shift in the approach towards the river rejuvenation by this act. There was a 5-tier structure put in place with the National Ganga Council at the top, chaired by the Honorable Prime Minister himself. We have Empowered Task Force, which is chaired by our Minister of Jal Shakti. Then we have the NMCG, then we have the state level mission on for Clean Ganga, chaired by the chief secretaries of the states. And we at the grassroots level, we also have the district Ganga committees, which are chaired by the district magistrates or the district collectors. The empowered committee of the executive committee of National Mission for Clean Ganga has been given the power to sanction projects, single project worth of close to $115 million. That means this cut across the bureaucratic requirement of sanctioning at the ministerial level. And then today we have taken, and then we brought up the implementation of the hybrid entity-based PPP mode for sewage treatment plants. There is another paradigm shift in the wastewater sector in this country. As on today, we have taken close to 366 projects worth of approximately $4 billion. The nature of projects include STPs, sewer networks, riverfront development, crematorium, afforestation, biodiversity conservation, CETP, Central Common Effluent Treatment Plans for industries, rural sanitation, GIS mapping, real-time water quality monetizations, and so on and so forth. The sewage projects are close to 160 projects with an investment of close to $3.2 billion to create a treatment capacity of close to 5,000 million liters per day, and a sewer network of close to another 5,000 kilometers. We have already completed 81 projects and created a treatment capacity of 1,500 MLD and a network of close to 4,000 kilometers. In next 2 years, we hope that all these 5,000 MLD treatment capacity will be created, and also all the network will also be completed. Now I'll talk about a little bit about HAM projects. Among the sewage treatment projects, we have taken close to 29 projects in 19 packages at a cost of US dollars 1.4 billion under a hybrid annuity-based PPP mode. I will not get into the technicalities of hybrid annuity PPP at this juncture because there is another speaker who is also going to talk about it, and maybe we'll talk about it in the later stage as well. We have already these are packaged in 19 packages. Already we have awarded 15 packages. We have already received tender for 2 packages, and 2 packages are under bidding. Now, till date, we have mobilized close to US dollar 350 million, and there is a potential of another 580 million US dollar of private capital mobilization. As far as the project completion is concerned, we have commissioned 2 projects already, and another project is to be commissioned next month. And another 2 packages will be completed by June, and then by end of 2023, all these packages, all the 19 packages will be commissioned. But more projects are going to become in the pipeline. What we have achieved till date, after all these program investments, the DO level, the dissolved oxygen level in the river has substantially increased to 5 milligram per liter, which is a good indication. The BOD level also has reduced, and except for 2 locations which is exceeding 3 to 5 milligram per liter range, but that will improve in another 2 years' time. The biodiversity has significantly increased. We could see the dolphin calves popping up in the river in some places. We have also introduced the minimum e-flow requirement. For that, there is a notification, regulatory notification has been published. We are also focusing on reuse of treated wastewater. We have already constructing a 20 ml tertiary treatment plant at Mathura, One City One Operator project, which will supply treated water to the IOCL refinery in Mathura, petroleum refinery. We are also exploring the possibility of reusing the water for thermal power plants, which are situated within the 50-kilometer range of STPs. Other avenues like using the water for irrigation purpose, these are all on the anvil. NMCG has also extended this concept of NMCG is to be extended to other river basins in the country. This is as of now. Now we have moved from Namami Gange Program 1, which was a 5-year program, to Namami Gange Program 2, which is once again the government has committed $2.96 billion US dollars, where ongoing schemes will be close to US dollar of 1.4 billion, with the continued liability from the previous scheme, and the new initiative will be close to US dollar for 1.48 billion. Now we have also brought in a new concept, which is called Arth Ganga, which brings the economic well-being from the river. So this is going to focus on certain aspects like reuse of treated water, recycling of sludge, zero-based natural farming, organic farming, then tourism-related activities, so that people connect to the river and they own the ownership of the rejuvenation of the river, and sustaining it will remain with people. The concept of circular economy is getting explored. And we are also focusing on the fecal sludge management plants in semi-urban and rural areas. As of now, this is what I wanted to share. The key success factors of what NMCG or Namami Gange program is that there is an empowered and dedicated institutional structure with a dedicated funding line. There is the innovative approaches in our business models in the construction and operation of sewage treatment plants, and then consultative and collaborative approach, multi-sectoral, multi-strategic and multidisciplinary interventions, and adoption of modern technologies. With this, I will conclude here, and would love to listen from you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kumar, for this highly vivid, clear picture at a number of different levels, including the importance of the river, the economic, cultural, and environmental life in India, as well as a lot of details on how this has actually been implemented. So at the end of the session, we'll open up for additional questions, but let me at this juncture pivot to Maud, who will help take this conversation forward. Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you, Thomas. And let me go to Rajneesh now. So Rajnish is working for Lubeck, which is the wastewater treatment company. So the Clean Ganga program created a new type of PPP model with hybrid annuity. So 40% of the capital cost paid to the private developers on the completion of the construction, while the remaining 60% of the cost will be paid over the life of the project as annuity, along with operation and maintenance expenses. Can you explain what innovative features of this transaction was crucial for its success from a sustainability perspective?
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me in this webinar. See, I think you have raised a very, very valid point. I think this is a model which is the first time probably in the water sector we have seen in India. And I think as Mr. Madhav Kumar was mentioning earlier, I think the key to success is, a consultative approach. It's a multi-party arrangement where NMCG is involved, the state government, local urban bodies are involved, and private concessionaires like us are involved. Now, in the whole process, the best part is that, the government has taken all the stakeholders on board, and there were a series of meetings before we came to a conclusion that what is going to be the implementation. And I must share here that after the first round of tenders, I think again, the meetings were called, whatever are the issues which all the stakeholders had raised, whether it was state, urban, local body, or the private concessionaires. I think NMCG has been very, very flexible in, listening to us, taking the right points forward, and maybe something which was not desirable, they have. So this is something which really made all concessionaires like us very confident. I must share here that we have never invested into water and wastewater infrastructure projects earlier in India. The major reason being that when we were, the payment today in India, the revenue which urban local bodies generate is not even sufficient to pay the OPEX, leave aside the CAPEX. But in this particular case, I think NMCG, as Mr. Madhav Kumar said, that it was converted into an authority. So when it got converted into an authority, there was a counterparty guarantee, both for the CAPEX and OPEX. And in terms of CAPEX, 40% is being paid, as you rightly said, at the completion of the project. And the balance is paid as an annuity. So it's a win-win situation where the concessionaires have to be confident of not only building, but operating the plant as per the design parameters for next 15 years. So this was one aspect. Now, coming back to how these guarantees, when we spoke to various institutions, I think we did one project in KMDA, where IFC is our debt partner, along with Tata Clean Tech Capital and Eversource, another green fund, UK based, they are our equity partner. Now, in the whole process, the climate funds, they have shown a lot of interest because of the model they have generated. It's not just about building STPs. I think it was very elaborately discussed that it's about rejuvenating the whole river, the ecosystem in and around it, and maintaining it. The sustainability is the key. So these were a few things which really led to a lot of interest. And today, if you ask me, we as Viatech Wabag, we operate not only just in India, we are operating in 30 countries spread across 4 continents. I think this model is something in all developing nations. This is a model which needs to be replicated, and it will ensure sustainability. It will ensure that the concessionaires are paid in time, irrespective of whether the revenue generation is not there. And also, we were given, it's a technology agnostic PQs. So in the process, we are allowed to incorporate the best technologies available. Definitely cost effectiveness is the key. And also, I must share here with you that one of the plants, the first plant under Namami Gange, which was commissioned in Varanasi, It's a 140 million liters per day plant. It's a power neutral plant. When I say power neutral plant, that means we are taking zero power from the grid. 100% captive power is generated through the biogas, and the methane is fed to the engine, and it is being run. And it was even inaugurated by our Honorable Prime Minister. So sustainability is something which has been keeping, and now I think going forward, we are even looking with support of NMCG to recover all the three components. We are already talking about energy from the gas. We're talking about recycled water, and also slag to be converted into fuel or manure. So that's how this sustainability is the key. And I feel that today, initially it was very few people from financial institutions because of the sustainable model. Today I find a lot of people are interested. They have been approaching us to partner with us for upcoming projects. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. And it's a very good overview of all the different aspects of sustainability in that project. And I have now another question for you, and it's all about the perspective and the point of view of investors. And I think you already touched a bit on that. And so what made investors so interested in this project, and how did you define success in this regard? And why do you think this model is easily replicable?
Yeah, I think I partly addressed that in my first answer itself, but being very, very specific, as I said, today, one of the key things is when an investor comes, one is the financial security. That is something which has been adequately addressed in this particular model. And by no, it may not be directly a sovereign guarantee, but the kind of guarantee we have, I think Mr. Madhav Kumar will agree with me, that it is as good as a sovereign guarantee which is being given to the concessionaire. So it's being a central government counter guarantee for payment of annuity and the OPEX. That's one part of it. Second is the model in terms of climate change and sustainability. I think this is a model, as I mentioned earlier also. This is going to be something where green funds, they are very key. Because in the past, there have been a lot of projects where investment has come, but in the long term, the sustainability of the projects and its effect on the environment was not taken into account. Here in this particular model of river rejuvenation, biodiversity, in and around the ecosystem, everything is getting addressed. So that is creating a lot of interest from financial investors who want to partner with us, and it's also definitely a green project. So our investors are talking about it as a green project, and I think going forward, although I'm not from NMCG, but during this COVID phase, there are a lot of states within the India, since we have a federal system, a lot of states which have requested us to come and discuss with us through a virtual media on implementation of the same model in different states. So that itself shows that what is the kind of interest, the kind of security, both from the concessionaires as well as from the financial institutions. It is evoked. And not only this, there are other developing nations where I know I cannot name them, but where I'm involved, and they are also taking a lot of details about this particular model and trying to create a similar model to rejuvenate their rivers and water bodies. I hope I have answered your question.
Yeah, thank you very much. And I will go now to Thomas. And just a question, because we had some hard time for one of our speakers, Rui Suarez, to join from the Tiba Bay port. So let me see if Rui is here. If it's not here, Thomas, I guess you will ask the question to Chris. So I will ask Chris if you can put his camera on. Thanks, Chris. And so back to you, Thomas, for the next question. Thank you very much.
Okay, thanks very much, Maud. Chris, delighted to see you again on camera. So, as regards the T-Bar Bay project, can you please outline for our listeners what were the main sustainability objectives and the expected outcomes for the government? In addition, why was this project so critical and vital to connect Timor-Leste to the world?
Sure, thanks, Thomas. So the project is really created in a context of a newly independent country. So Timor's just become independent, just finding its feet. And as part of that, they developed their own strategic development plan and worked out, what were the real priority projects they wanted to pursue. And one of the glaring challenges they faced was really around port connectivity. The port for the country was choked. It was really just an inter-island ferry terminal that had graduated to become the main port. But it really, with all the imports coming in, all the activity, it was just a choke point. And so they knew they needed to do something about that because the costs were just flowing throughout the whole economy. And the interesting thing was that they settled on a solution that would involve the private sector. So we were delighted to have that opportunity with a government, a new government of a new country who thought, well, maybe we need the private sector to help us solve this challenge. And so that's where it all started, that kind of identifying the problem and thinking more broadly about, what the solutions might look like. And I think in their mind, they wanted a new port to deal with those congestion issues, but also to start to create a bit of, a center, a hub of activity, for the economy, for development, for other things to spin off from. So that's really what the government had in mind from the outset for the project.
Thanks very much for that, Chris. And I think witnessing some of the challenges of working in Timor-Leste and the fact that Mr. Suarez is having difficulty dialing it out and into our video conference at the moment. But that being said, the construction of the T-Bar Bay port is now a fact. It's just been completed and the port has just started its operations. So it was quite a journey to get to this point where these important milestones have been achieved. So having been there from the start, Chris, can you please share with us some of the lessons learned from the implementation of the project, which might benefit our listeners on the call who are in countries similar to Timor-Leste, and maybe some of the lessons learned in the PPP model that could be applied elsewhere?
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, in a place like Timor-Leste, where everyone's doing things for the first time, I think one of the main lessons was around the commitment of dedicated capacity on the government side to the project. So, and I don't mean just like a team, from different ministries. They actually set up institutions that they knew would be required during the development of the project, and then during financial close, and now, through the construction phase, and then operations. And so, if you have good people and you train them and they're dedicated to this project, you have the ability to kind of overcome all sorts of setbacks, because you might have a perfectly designed transaction, but there's always going to be things that go wrong. And so I think the main lesson that I actually take away from the whole project is around that, is around just the focus on the government's focus on setting up those institutions, and our focus and other donors who are involved on helping to strengthen those institutions and getting the people who are able to make the project work. So that for me is the most important lesson. And I think the other lesson that goes along with that is, is really something from our side in IFC as a transaction advisors. I think strategically we realized that it was really important. This is the first transaction in the country that it had to be successful, and that momentum of a successful transaction would really be, the whole process of Timor, considering whether to use PPPs more or not, or less would really depend a lot on whether this project was successful. So we put a lot of focus on the process and the building of confidence, both in the government, who, you know, there were always people who doubted whether this was the right way to go, but more importantly, in the bidders, in the private sector. You know, here's a country newly emerged from conflict, and we're expecting people to come and invest $150 million or more. So their confidence needed to be built. And I think it's one of the reasons why the process, the gestation process, you know, it was years, right, for that confidence to be established, where government was happy to make the decisions it needed to make to bring the investors on board. And the investors over time saw that the government was serious, and different commitments were made. And so through that, you had a coming together of confidence and trust. And I think, you know, these aren't like, they're not highly technical lessons learned for in a particular sector, but they're just very pragmatic lessons that we learned from working in an environment like Timor-Leste, and being able to really go from the germ of Shanana Gushmail's idea of what a good project would be to actually having it built. And that took, you know, pretty much 10 years from start to end. But these pragmatic things that really, for me, stood out the most strongly as, you know, the reasons why it was successful.
Thanks very much for these insights and long-term perspective and patience and tenacity in the project, Chris. So Maud, I'd like to return the floor to you to take the conversation forward.
Thank you, Thomas. And now I will ask the question that was supposed to be for Chris from the start. So you may have touched a bit on that, but I think there is a lot more to elaborate on. So again, the role of IFC advisory was quite unique on the Timor-Leste port project. It helped build capacity in key institutions and to develop, legislate, and implement the PPP and contractual regime. It took 5 years, and 5 years from the initial scope to the signing of the concession contract, and 3 more years to reach financial close. That's pretty long time, but at the same time, you had to actually build the enabling environment first. So what were the policy and regulatory challenge faced in that project?
Yeah, I mean, it's a long list of challenges, but I think to distill what, again, you know, maybe what the main things were for me, you know, we knew that the transaction that was going to be so important in the outcome, you know, the actual transaction being successful. But in that, I mean, we also understood there was no PPP law, there's no PPP regulations, or no real process set out at all for how this should be done. So it was quite interesting. The two things went in parallel initially. So we had work to define the transaction, what it would look like technically and structurally. But in parallel, ADB and some other institutions helped the government pull together their PPP law, and then that institution I was talking about before was created. So we had kind of 2 tracks going simultaneously, and at the right point, the law was passed, and then you know, the project sort of fitted into the framework that had been set out. And I think that was really important because, firstly, to get the law passed within the government, everyone had to understand a whole lot more about PPPs than they did before. And then to actually show, well, this project that we're working on now, it's, you know, following into those processes and legal requirements that set out. That was really important in basically, you know, creating the foundation for this. And then subsequently 3 or 4 more other PPP projects the government's initiated, and everyone now understands the law, and, you know, it's a strong process to follow. So that's obviously, that was a pretty key policy development. That was a collective effort, not really even IFC leading. We led more on the transaction. I think another interesting aspect in an environment like Timor, you know, the sector regulatory environment was set up, you know, by the UN, and some of it was probably Indonesian before that. And so you had all bits and pieces all over the place, and they certainly weren't geared around a transaction of this nature, you know, a PPP concession for a port. And so then a bit of debate was, well, do we try and create those institutions and that law, the sector law as well? But I think it very quickly became clear that the only approach that was going to be probably practical and also most importantly acceptable to the private party was to have a lot of that regulatory meat in the contract. So rather than, you know, in national law, because in the contract that they could see right in front of them, black and white, what needed to happen, you know, what were the tariff regimes, what was the technical standards, you know, what was the process for changing things. It was all set out there in the contract that everyone was going to sign. And for them, there was a lot more confidence around that than there was, you know, than potentially the development of a regulatory regime, laws and institutions, none of which exist yet. So, you know, and maybe in time those developments will happen, but really to make the project bankable, it was necessary to spell out a lot of what in other places you might find in, you know, national laws actually in the contract. So we've got a really substantial contract. It's basically, you know, in a lot of ways duplicating or creating a port sector regulatory environment. But it was interesting, like, and I can imagine this issue being a common one faced in countries where that, you know, that you know, legal framework's not really developed. And probably finally, if I've got time, I mean, the other big part of this project was around the environment and social aspects. So T-Bar Bay is a relatively undeveloped site. There's mangroves there, there's fishermen that use the site, there's coral reefs. So a huge effort went into making sure it complied with the, you know, well, our performance standards, and other parties were involved as well. So that was a big undertaking for a government like Timor-Leste, which never has been really exposed to these standards before. But it was tackled from the very beginning in terms of even this location selection, the siting, the design, then the mitigations, the offsets, the engagement with the local community was probably as much went into that as went into some of the, you know, the port technical aspects of it. And that was an investment that really paid off because the government got confident around how to do things the right way and, you know, allowing enough time and engagement in that. And actually the local community turned out to be extremely supportive of the whole thing. So I took from that and working on the transaction that time and effort was really well spent in trying to set up the port in, you know, in a way where we could all be happy that you know, the highest possible standards were reached.
Thank you very much, Chris. And we are very happy because Solaris just joined us. So can you maybe turn your camera on so we can see you? And we have question for you. Oh, that's great. That's great. The connection was a bit hard, and actually I have a question for you. And it's mainly, and Chris did an introduction about really the background of the project, the legislative framework, and the PPP within the contract, because the contract has to build really a lot of things to in the contract, because the legislative framework we're not completely there yet. But I have a question on the implementation of the project, because so the port construction has just been completed, and what was the challenge during the construction of the port, and now you just start operation and maintenance, and can you just give back some feedback on that, please?
Okay, hello. So sorry about all this issue with the connection. I just tried a lot of times and finally I could get connected. Can you hear? Hello?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. So okay, thanks, Chris, for answering on my behalf the first part of the question. Now, in terms of challenge, this project is still on the construction. It's still not completed yet. We had undergone several delays and extension. So this is pretty much because of those challenges that are there. The main challenge would be the ongoing pandemic that has affected badly the progress, but this project never stopped because of the partnerships that we have between the private partner, Valore, as well as the government. So this in the PPP project, what we can learn from this project is that it requires a strong spirit of partnership between the government and private to ensure that any challenges that arise, any delays, anything can be addressed mutually for the benefit of the project. So pretty much this pandemic issue is the main issue. But prior to this, what is important is I guess this project for Timor-Leste is one of the main project, the first PPP, and because of the kind of a new country, lack of resources, a lot of capacity buildings within the government to manage this process from the bidding throughout to financial close, through constructions and future operations is very important. And also we need to note that because this is the first PPP project for the country, a lot of lessons has been adapted from projects in other countries, and we try to ensure that the right legal framework are developed before the start of this PPP project. And in addition to this, this project also has learned a lot of benefit to the government. Things like ensuring the local communities' participations through direct participations or indirect, like employment of communities in the nearby of the project, involvement of the local communities in implementations of environmental management plan, as well as the biodiversity action plan, as well as from the project, they also developed a lot of local content initiatives. One of the main one is the construction of sport facilities to be completed, and also providing health services within the port to the local communities. These are some of the benefits and the challenges and opportunities that had arise from this project in this new country, I would say, Timor-Leste and first PPP, and one of the biggest foreign investment project for public infrastructure for Timor-Leste. I think these are the main answers that I could provide.
Thank you very much, Rui. And we still have a question for Christopher as well. Really, it's to broaden a bit the discussion and to see what would make the private investment into sustainable project easier in the Pacific region, just beyond Timor-Leste, and what are the type of really what means financing sustainability in the Pacific region for you?
Yeah, thanks. It's a good question, one we've thought quite a lot about. And I think, at the big picture level, you're talking about sustainable infrastructure. And I think in the Pacific, a lot of the infrastructure is actually publicly procured and publicly operated. And not in every case, but in too many cases, you have that sort of build, don't maintain, fall to pieces, rebuild, that endless cycle, which is really an unsustainable cycle. So to get out of that cycle, there's many opportunities where the private sector can play a role. And I think it involves models kind of like T-Bar Bay, this hybrid model. So T-Bar Bay is it's about a $280 million initial capex, of which 150 is from the investor and 130 is from the government. So the government's used its contribution to leverage money from the private sector. And I think pretty much all the projects that IFC is working on in the Pacific follow this kind of model. And if governments and donors think more creatively about how they might be able to use their public funds to bring in private involvement, then maybe we can increase the opportunities to benefit from both the investment, but I think maybe more impactful is actually the private expertise, the kind of performance incentives, all those, the innovation, all the things you get from having a private partner involved in a project. So for me, when we talk about sustainable infrastructure in the Pacific, it's moving away from just a pure public, pure private, but how can we bring those things together? And I think it is happening. And certainly on our side, there's quite a number of projects going on where this is the model. And then when you take that one step further into kind of thinking about, carbon neutrality, green projects, I mean, a lot of that comes from innovation. I don't know that governments are the best sort of entities to come up with solutions to address climate issues. Maybe government can set standards, but most of the kind of new ideas come from the private sector. So this model is a kind of a way to start to embed that more and more in what's happening in the Pacific. So when I talk about this to donors and governments, it's always to try and get them to think more broadly about the funding sources and the types of projects they can pursue.
Thank you very much. And Thomas, do you have another question for Madhava?
Yes, thank you very much. So we'll take everybody's imaginations back to the banks of the Ganges. So, Mr. Kumar, in the 2 minutes that we've got remaining in this part of the session before we transition to the open Q&A, can you just give us some sense about why previous public investment in order to try and improve the water quality and address the pollution issues in the Ganga was not getting the desired results?
Well, I think I highlighted in the beginning, the investment in Ganga started somewhere in 1984, and then in the Ganga Action Program 1, and then 1995 Ganga Action Program 2. But the investment size was very, very small. It was, close to 150 million US dollars. You can't even believe that today we are sanctioning the executive committee of the Namami Gange, Mission Ganga, has the power to sanction one project worth of 150 million in one go. So now we can imagine that that's one reason. The other reason is the operational maintenance of these assets, which were created, were left to the state governments and the ULBs. They did not have enough funds. They did not have capacity or even attitude to maintain it. That's the reason it did not yield the desired results. So all those learnings we have incorporated in the Namami Gange program when we devised it, and also brought in the hybrid annuity-based PPP mode. Today, the Namami Gange program is a 100% central government funded program with 15 years of operation maintenance support. But beyond 15 years, the ULBs have to take care of it, for which we are also trying to build the capacity and also trying to bring in reforms, trying to identify other avenues of income through sale of treated wastewater and the like. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kumar, for this additional answers and clarification. So, Maud Jordana, back to you.
Thank you, Thomas. And we are almost on the time now to wrap up the session, but I'm just asking maybe a last question to Rui, because you managed to join us. So if you can turn back your camera on, that would be great. Yes. So you told us about the COVID impact on the project. So it was right in the middle of the construction. So I guess in terms of supply chain and other issue, can you tell us a bit more about what was the impact on the contract of COVID and on the construction more in detail, please?
Yes, I think like any other project, COVID has affected badly. In Timor, for this project, government has treated this as an essential project just to ensure that the project can continue. So any restrictions that are applied that are issued by the government to restrict movement of people, there is always exemption provided to this project to allow key people to move between the capital city and the project site. So this has helped that the project continue, although at a kind of a slower pace, but the project never stopped. This is what actions that the government had taken. And on the other side, the contractor also very committed, despite all this restriction. They try their best to continue to mobilize by whatever means that are there, not mobilize people to the construction site. For your information, this project the port is constructed by a Chinese company, China Harbor. So a lot of people need to be mobilized. All the workers need to be mobilized from China. And there is always solutions there where charter flights have been used, and the government will facilitate the kind of landing of the charter flight during this pandemic. So all these efforts that are taken by both the government side and the private and the contractor side had helped the project to continue, despite we are experiencing delay. We're supposed to have this project concluded construction by May, but in fact it's now delayed, and we only expect that this will be concluded by October or November this year to have the operation start. In terms of supply chain, it does affect, but then always the government always allows for anything that comes, all the supply of construction materials that comes abroad. There's always exemptions for them to be clear at the existing port, Dili port, to be able to supply to the construction site and to continue the construction. So in sum, the commitment and relationship between the operator and also the government is a key to ensure that any project can continue to move ahead despite whatever restrictions or challenges at site. I think this is what I could say about that. Yes.
So thank you very much, and we will need now to wrap up the session. So I would like to thank my co-moderator Thomas and all the panelists for participating to this session. Thank you, because we have been a bit traveling from India to Timor-Leste, back and forth in that journey, but I hope it was quite an interesting session on financing sustainability, and thank you very much to all for joining this session. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good, Maud. Thanks very much, Maud. Thanks to all the panelists and participants. We've heard about some very interesting cases today. Bye to everyone. Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you. Close mat karna.